Wissam's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the small security camera. He placed it carefully on the highest shelf of his old wooden bookcase. The lens, a tiny black circle, stared out like a miniature, unblinking eye. It pointed directly at his queen-sized bed. He hoped this little device would finally provide some answers. For weeks, perhaps even months now, his nights had been anything but restful. Sleep, which once offered solace, had transformed into a nightly battle, a recurring torment. He just wanted to understand what was happening to him, this strange and terrifying occurrence that stole his peace. Every night, or rather every early morning, it was the same. The clock on his nightstand would invariably show 3:12 a.m. He would jolt awake, his chest tight, his lungs burning. Gasping for air, a silent scream trapped in his throat, he'd sit bolt upright. It felt as if invisible hands were clamped around his neck, squeezing the life from him. The sensation was terrifyingly real, chilling him to the bone. He would stumble out of bed, heart pounding like a drum against his ribs, and gulp down water, the cool liquid, doing little to soothe the raw fear that clawed at his insides. Initially, Wissam had tried to rationalize these terrifying episodes. Perhaps it was stress from work. Lord knew his job had been demanding lately, or maybe, he considered, he was sleepwalking. He'd read about people doing strange things in their sleep, things they had no memory of upon waking. He even wondered if it was a bizarre form of sleep apnea, though he didn't fit the usual profile. He desperately clung to these logical explanations. He wanted more than anything for there to be a simple, non-threatening reason for his nightly ordeal, something a doctor could fix with a pill or advice. But the fear, a cold and persistent companion, whispered otherwise. It suggested something more sinister, something beyond the realm of normal explanations. The recurring precision of the 3:12 a.m. awakenings felt too deliberate, too orchestrated. It was this gnawing unease, this creeping dread that finally pushed him to buy the camera. He needed to see. He needed to know if he was truly alone in his room during those terrifying moments. He had to confront whatever it was, even if it was just a figment of his overactive imagination or something much, much worse. He couldn't live like this anymore. The next morning, after another harrowing 3:12 a.m. episode, Wissam felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. He made coffee, his hands still unsteady. He let the weak morning light filter into the living room before he dared to retrieve the camera's memory card. His laptop hummed quietly as he inserted the card. The folder contained hours of footage. He clicked on the first file, steeling himself. Most of it was mundane, just him tossing and turning, the quiet stillness of the empty room. The clock in the corner of the footage ticked slowly, agonizingly forward. He fast-forwarded through the early hours of the night. Nothing, just him sleeping. Then, as the timestamp approached 3 a.m., he slowed the playback. His heart began to hammer in his chest. He watched himself sleeping, seemingly peaceful. The digital clock in the frame crept towards the dreaded time 3:10 a.m., 3:11 a.m. Then, just as the numbers clicked over to 3:12 a.m., he saw it. A subtle shift in the shadows near his closed bedroom door. He leaned closer to the screen, his breath catching in his throat. It was difficult to discern at first, a mere flicker in the low light. Then the shape solidified. It was tall, impossibly tall and slender, a dark, motionless figure standing in the corner of his room, partially obscured by the wardrobe. It wasn't there at 3:11 a.m. It was undeniably there at 3:12 a.m. There was no door opening, no sound of entry. It just appeared. Wissam felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. His blood ran cold. This was no dream. This was no stress-induced hallucination. This was real. There was something or someone in his room with him while he slept, while he gasped for breath. He replayed the footage again and again. Each time the figure stood there, a silent, menacing sentinel. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It just stood, watching him. The sheer stillness of it was perhaps the most terrifying part. It was an unnatural stillness, a predatory patience that sent shivers down his spine. How long had this been happening? How many nights had this thing stood over him? The questions screamed in his mind. each one more horrifying than the last. He felt a primal fear grip him, a terror so profound it threatened to swallow him whole. Wissam stared at the frozen image on his laptop screen. The tall, dark figure remained in the corner, a silent silhouette against the faint glow from the window. He zoomed in, trying to make out any details, any features, but the low-light footage was grainy, indistinct. It was just a shape, a human-like form, yet utterly alien in its presence. He could feel his sanity fraying at the edges. This was impossible. Such things didn't happen. Not in a normal world, not to normal people like him. But the evidence was right there, playing on a loop of terror. He let the footage play in real time from the moment the figure appeared. For several minutes, nothing changed. The figure remained perfectly still. Wissam himself was thrashing in the bed, the silent struggle for air clearly visible. Then, just as he was about to fast forward, thinking he'd seen all there was to see of its terrifying stillness, the figure moved. It was a subtle movement, a slight, almost imperceptible turn of its head. It turned towards the bookshelf. It turned towards the camera. Towards him, watching the recording. A low sound emitted from the laptop speakers. At first, Wissam thought it was static, a glitch in the recording. He strained his ears. Then he heard it, a whisper. It was faint, raspy, like dry leaves skittering across concrete. He cranked up the volume, his hand shaking violently. The whisper came again, clearer this time, chilling him to the core. "I see you, Wissam," it rasped. "I know you're watching." The voice was cold, devoid of any emotion, yet filled with an undeniable malice. It was addressing him, through the camera, through the recording. Panic, pure and unadulterated, surged through Wissam. He slammed the laptop shut with a violent crack. He didn't think, he reacted. His breath came in ragged gasps, mirroring his nightly episodes. He fumbled for the power cord of the camera, yanking it from the wall socket with such force he almost pulled the bookshelf over. He then ripped the memory card from the laptop and, in a frenzy, formatted it, deleting every trace of the horrifying footage. He had to erase it. He had to make it untrue. But the whisper echoed in his mind, a terrifying refrain. The rest of the day passed in a blur of fear and denial. Wissam tried to convince himself it was a nightmare, a waking dream brought on by the camera and his own paranoia. He had deleted the footage, the camera was off, it was over. He told himself this, over and over like a desperate mantra. But the chilling whisper, "I know you're watching," kept replaying in his mind, a constant, terrifying reminder. He jumped at every creak of the floorboards, every shadow that flickered in his peripheral vision. He felt watched, exposed, even in the bright light of day. Night fell like a shroud. Wissam dreaded going to bed, but exhaustion eventually won. He left all the lights on in the hallway, a childish defense against the encroaching darkness. He lay in bed, rigid, staring at the ceiling, listening. Sleep, when it finally came, was shallow and fitful. Then, inevitably, he woke. With a jolt, his chest was on fire. He was gasping, choking. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers slick with sweat. The screen illuminated the room. 3:12 a.m. It was happening again. Even without the camera, even after deleting the evidence. The terror was more intense this time, more suffocating. A faint, rhythmic scratching sound broke through his panic. It seemed to be coming from the ensuite bathroom. His heart hammered against his ribs. He didn't want to look. He really didn't want to look. But an unseen force, a horrifying compulsion, drew him out of bed. His legs felt like lead as he stumbled towards the bathroom door, pushing it open. The room was filled with steam, though he hadn't used the shower. The mirror above the sink was completely fogged over, and there, scrawled in the condensation, as if by a skeletal finger, was a message. 2 words. They seemed to glow faintly in the dim light filtering in from the bedroom. Saw that. Wissam stared, his mind struggling to comprehend. Saw what? Saw him delete the footage? Saw his fear? The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. It knew Everything. Deleting the recording hadn't banished it. It had only angered it, or perhaps amused it. He backed away slowly, a strangled sob escaping his lips. The camera didn't lie. But some truths were far more terrifying than any lie. And this truth was now etched not just on his mirror, but deep within his soul. He was not alone, and it was watching, always watching.